Last week I shared 5 ways that I think jiu-jitsu, or at least the way that it's practiced, can improve karate. So this week, let's add 5 more. Hey, what's up? I'm Ken. This is KenfuTV, and each week I release videos in the martial arts, philosophy, technique, training, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of thing you're into. I hope you stick around. I hope that you subscribe if you haven't, and I hope that you share this with somebody that you think might find it useful. If you want to support what I'm doing here on the channel, don't forget that I have memberships starting at $1.99. You can support what I'm doing, and it really, really helps out. Stay tuned till the end of the video to see some previews of some of the members-only content that's coming out this week. So, jiu-jitsu. First off, as I've already mentioned, if you haven't seen last week's video, I'll link it up here. You can go check that out because that's going to be a good place to start because we're just going to be adding to that. A reminder, I love karate. I do not think that karate is inferior. I do not think that jiu-jitsu is superior. I think that we need to look around and benefit from other methods of training, and that jiu-jitsu, arguably, in my opinion, based on the research and studying that I've done, I think it's closer to the old ways of training than the current modern karate is. Modern karate has changed a lot in its focus and its practice. I think karate is incredibly capable, and it's something that we should continue to improve and to love. With that, these are the things that I'm talking about. When I talk about jiu-jitsu, I'm talking about, let's take some of the ways that they're training, some of the things that we've maybe lost along the way. And maybe your school does them. I know mine already does a lot of these, but I just want to talk about emphasizing how important they are. And let's see if we can make our karate even better. But without further ado, we'll jump into this week's 5 ways that I think karate can be improved by jiu-jitsu. So the first one I want to talk about, the first one, number 1, is the focus on setups and positioning being way more important than the actual technique that's being applied. The submission, for the term that they use. There is so much emphasis put on being in the right place and moving your body to the right place and making micro adjustments to be in the right place in order to be able to apply what you want to apply efficiently. That's a thing that I don't know that we spend enough time. It's kind of rough and tumble in karate, and I like that about it. But I also feel like sometimes, and this is something that I've looked at for years, is that where you are when you deliver your strikes or you do your technique is so important. And I think that more emphasis should be put on less how do you throw the perfect punch or do the perfect kick, and more about how do you be in the right place to do it. If you're going to sweep or headlock or choke or strangle, whatever you're going to do, are you in the right place? I would argue that the majority of the jiu-jitsu lessons are about being in the right place, not about how to do the perfect technique. In fact, most of the correction you ever get when your technique's not working is moving to a better place, getting a better angle. There's a lot of emphasis on small things. Move your elbow this way, turn your head, lift it, look up, do these things. These little things that change everything about the way the technique works. I think that karate can drastically benefit from this type of focus. Less about the thing you're doing and more about, are you in the right place to do it? That brings me to number 2. In jiu-jitsu, there is such a focus on fluidity and not being attached to any one thing, but being able to easily transition to something else. This ties so well into number 1 because what it's really doing is it's saying, if you're in the right position, if you found a good place, there's many options, and they use the term flowcharting. They flowchart it out. Where can I go from here? What things can I do from here? And how do these things relate to each other? Being able to fluidly change from one thing to another based on something that somebody else is doing, because let's face it, they're not a static person. They're going to continue to fight or change, and if you're doing something to them, they're going to react to it. So being able to be sensitive to that and make an adjustment and flow fluidly to something else in order to continue to maintain your advantage, well, I think that's the secret. One of the things that I think is really interesting is the way that they progress their knowledge, the skill. And so that brings us to number 3. Jiu-jitsu has this really interesting kind of natural progression that I find fascinating, because the way that it works, you get in, you start learning technique, and after a period of time, and the school kind of dictates how much time that is, then you start working into rolling and sparring pretty early on, a few months in usually, and immediately you're faced with failure. Your job is to survive. Just, can you not die? on the ground? Can you continue to move? Can you not be tapped in an instant? And can you focus on building up your ability and your stamina to be able to maintain and last longer? Over time, that leads into the idea of control, moving from just surviving to being able to control the situation and to be able to manage the other person in a way that makes what they're trying to do difficult. Eventually, that leads into the idea of actually being able to turn the tide and submit them, being the one doing the submissions, being the one putting them in a place where they have to survive. All of these things, as they continue to work, is just a really fascinating way to approach skill development. The inclusion of failure and the fact that in order to get good, you have to recognize and give up on the fact that you're going to be perfect every time and focus on how to adapt and become comfortable and allow yourself to not get caught up in failure, but instead use it to teach you and to continue to move forward. Sometimes I think as modern karate moves forward, failure is a thing that just doesn't get addressed nearly as much. And then you got jiu-jitsu on the other hand, starting with failure and saying, hey, this is reality. This is a part of it. And only you can decide if it's going to change. I mentioned Rick's video last week on belt progression in jiu-jitsu. And one of the things that he talks about in there is the idea that people talk about blue belt being the #1 belt where people quit. But the truth is that it's white belt. That a lot of people never even make it to blue belt. This idea of failure is probably the reason people come in. They don't like getting smashed. They don't like having to do this and it not working very well and not being good at it. And they don't stick it out and they leave. Now, I would argue karate same way. Most people quit at white belt. They don't want to continue. It's not happening as fast as they'd like. It's harder than they thought it was going to be, etc., etc. One of the beautiful lessons that happens immediately in jiu-jitsu, and I mean immediately, is you start working technique. And it's before you even start rolling. You start working technique, and you are immediately faced with panic. Someone puts weight on you and gets their pressure on you, and it sucks. And it feels like you can't breathe. And panic ensues. It's your body's survival situation going, how do I manage this? We have a conversation right away about how that's the most difficult thing, and that's where we start. And managing panic and being able to operate in situations that make you supremely uncomfortable in like survival-based ways is a huge deal that I think really goes a long way to helping someone learn to adapt to situations and not give up as easy. That's not a thing that is easily built into karate the same way, because sparring's not going to generate that same kind of pressure, like physical pressure pressing on your chest or whatever. But this idea of panic, I don't know, maybe there's ways that can be implemented safely and logically, not just kind of forced into place, but instead introduced in a way that manifests naturally. And I think that have an interesting effect on the growth of a student, especially from the beginning. Confidence breeds from recognizing your ability to handle situations that make you uncomfortable. That's it. That was kind of an extra bonus tip. So we'll leave it in and we'll jump into the next one, number 4. The belt system. The belt system is, in my opinion, one of the best belt systems going right now. It only has a couple ranks. It has like 5. And then, I mean, technically you got like the coral belt and you have degrees of different things. But when it comes to the belts themselves, you've got a white belt, then you get your blue belt, you go into your purple, then your brown, then your black. That's it. So less belts and more emphasis on development. And it takes longer to get each one. There's some stripes in the belts and there's a process to getting to your next belt. But the truth is, even your blue belt, the first colored rank you're going to take, can take a year or more or multiple years to get. And that is unheard of in karate. You have 10 ranks before you even get to black belt, and those are navigated pretty quickly right away. And I think there's a resilience that's built when getting a belt is not the high priority. It's not your main motivation. Jiu-jitsu, having less belts, getting one is a much bigger deal. In fact, I would argue that blue belt in a good school is halfway through the ranks in karate in its equivalency. And everybody's different. How long it takes for somebody to get from blue to purple to brown, and especially to black, it's all over the place. There's no specific measure. What measure there is the fact that getting to your black belt is not going to be a 3 to 5 year ordeal, which is pretty common, I think, in karate. My instructor always said that he never really tested people before 5 years. He does make exceptions, and some people test earlier than that. I tested earlier than that, but realistically, typically he's not even looking at that for before 5 years. A lot of schools, 3 years to 5 years is pretty typical. Jiu-jitsu It's like a 10-year track for most people. There are exceptions made, but it is significantly longer path to get to Shodan, to the first black belt. The amount of emphasis put on skill development and the development of the individual is so huge that it takes a while to make any of that happen. And I love that. I think that's exactly how it should work. I don't think getting rid of rank is the right idea, but I think having rank be structured more this way definitely has a better approach. This isn't entirely true. I should note that kids belts, there are more of them in most schools. If you're going to have a kids track, kids motivate differently, and that's just the truth. Lastly, we're talking number 5, theft and stealing. What I mean by that is that if somebody sees somebody do something good when they're sparring, especially if they're training with somebody else or training in a different school, or they're watching the UFC or whatever, and somebody lands something, it's immediately being trained. People are immediately trying to absorb it, understand it, and apply it. In karate, there's a whole lot of not that. I didn't teach you that. I don't want you doing that. Do this instead, or no, this is how I would do it. You should do it this way. You're my student. This is how we do it. This is how our style does it. All of these kinds of words are the reason why karate gets held back. We need to be able to move forward, and that means recognizing when there is new information or a new way to do something or something that you haven't done before and embracing it. The old masters did it. They spent time training with each other. They spent time fighting. They spent time doing whatever. That was why they sought each other out. If somebody was good at a thing they didn't know how to do, they went and found them, and they said, let's train. They were always trying to add to the repertoire, to continue to make themselves better when they saw something that worked well and they wanted to understand it. This is something that I think has been greatly lost, probably in particular when karate became more Japanese in its design and everything was more regimented, how everything came out, and the idea of training in different styles or doing things the way a different style did was kind of maybe disrespectful. That sort of problem. That's a thing that didn't used to exist. I fully believe that didn't used to exist, and I think it's a thing that shouldn't exist anymore. So we need to steal more. I tell my students, I'm like, you steal it. In fact, if you look at the way that I do kata now, it's 100% theft. Everybody does the katas at the beginning, and the people who know them, people that I've trained that were taught how to do the katas, are performing them, leading the class, and everybody else is literally stealing it the entire time. If a newer student has those katas, it's because they stole them. It's because they watched, they looked, they learned, and they pulled that information into themselves. I'm doing that on purpose because I want people to build the skill of stealing technique from other people. You've got to be able to expand what you do, and that means you've got to be able to pay attention, and you've got to be able to learn how you process taking information that's not given directly to you and making it your own. Jiu-jitsu, and the idea that when you're rolling and somebody does something, you stop and you're like, how did you do that? Or figuring it out, it keeps happening to you, and you're like, oh, I think I understand what's happening. I'm going to try it. And then you continue to try to do it, and maybe you land it, maybe you don't. I love that process, and I think that it is perfect. I think the way rolling works is just fantastic, and I really wish that karate had a good rolling equivalent. It doesn't. Range and percussion change things, and so it will never match. But the closer we can get to that sort of thing, it will be amazing. So there you have it. Those are 5 more ways that I think jiu-jitsu and the way that it is practiced and its philosophies and that can improve karate. You guys really responded well to the last video. Lots of comments, lots of discussion, which I thought was wonderful. There was even discussions about how old school karate had jiu-jitsu and old school jiu-jitsu had karate. And it's like, yeah, they were born from the same place. This stuff. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is different, and we need to recognize that it is different because it has changed. It has been adopted and focused in a way that has made things different. Some of these philosophies and practices are from those changes of Jiu-Jitsu becoming Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When I started training it, originally it was the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu that was embedded in the karate that we did that I started with. Adding in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the more newaza ground technique kind of stuff came later and came with the introduction of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a focus. But all of that is to say, let's spend less time worried about where it came from, or, well, karate used to have it, or Jiu-Jitsu is because of karate, or any of these kind of things. True, not true, doesn't matter. We need to focus on just improving. I think we spend too much time having schisms and trying to divide ourselves and define ourselves as we're better because our style does it this way, or we're closer to the roots of this master or that master, our lineage is shorter, or it goes further back, or however you want to look at it. I think all of that crap gets in the way. Gets in the way. Who's it helping? What is it actually doing for you to focus on all of that? I don't think that you're ever going to be in a situation where you need to use your skills and you'll be like, well, you know what? Shouldn't have picked me. My skills came directly from so-and-so. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter. Your skills are your skills, and in that moment, your skills are what is going to do the doing. Doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if you train under the best teacher in the world and they're incredible. You're not them. You can't do what they do, and they can't do what you do. So yeah, your teacher could make you great, and you could train with an amazing teacher, but your amazing teacher can only facilitate you becoming who you are and the way that you do things. So let's spend less time focusing on all these other parts, and let's spend more time focusing on building our skills, becoming better at what we do. And I don't know, kind of getting lost in this thought. This thought is so much bigger than me. So I'll just leave you with that. Let's spend less time in the garbage, more time on how we can improve our karate. Thank you for watching this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you at least some things to think about. If it did, give you questions or whatever, let's talk about it and throw them in the comments and we can have a conversation about it. I want to give a special shout out to the people who have subscribed. We've got some Uchideshi, we've got some Kenfudoka members who are helping support this channel and make videos like these possible. And I couldn't do it without you. It's incredibly helpful. And if you are interested in helping the channel, supporting it, make sure to hit the join link down below, get more information on how the memberships work and the stuff that you get. There's definitely perks. Every little bit of it counts. Every little bit of it helps me continue to do what I'm doing each week. Now working on 7 times a week. One of the major things that I'm really excited about doing now is these videos straight from the mat, where it's me teaching what I teach, recorded and shared with members of the site. And these are some of the things that you're going to see this week of the lessons I've been teaching on the mat. If you hung out this long, I hope that you take a peek at these videos right here to have a little bit more to watch. Check them out. And if you want to subscribe, if you're new here and want to subscribe, you can hit that right here. I'm Ken. This is KenfuTV, and I'll catch you in the next one.